All right, let's talk about the future of our cities. For a long time, planning them has been, well, a bit stuck in the past. But now, this new field called urban informatics is completely changing the game. It's giving us two new, really powerful ways to think about the complex, amazing places we all call home. It's all about using data in smarter ways to really understand and shape city life. So let's get right into it.
So here's the big question, the central challenge that planners are wrestling with right now. Cities aren't static machines you can just design and build. Nope, they're living, breathing, complex systems that are constantly evolving. And the old way of doing things, creating this one-size-fits-all, rigid master plan, it just doesn't work anymore. It's kind of like trying to write a detailed script for a live improv show. It's just doomed to fail. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to dig into why traditional planning is running into so many problems. Then we'll explore these two incredible new approaches, one that sees the city as a kind of code to be deciphered, and another that sees it as a conversation. After that, we'll see how these two actually work together. And finally, we'll wrap it all up by looking at what this all means for you.
For decades, the whole idea behind city planning was to predict and control how cities grow. But here's the thing that complexity science has shown us. Cities organize themselves. They have these amazing emergent patterns and feedback loops that are basically impossible to fully predict. So trying to treat a living, breathing city like it's just a static object you can design from a single blueprint, it's just not going to work. And this right here is the heart of the matter. We live in an age where technology and society are changing so incredibly fast, and our cities need to be able to flex and adapt with them. That's exactly where urban informatics comes in. It's not just giving us new tools, but, and this is the important part, it's giving us entirely new ways of thinking about how we guide a city's evolution. Okay, so let's dive into the first big approach. This one treats the city almost like an object of scientific study. It asks this really fascinating question. Even with all their differences and complexities, do all cities actually follow a set of universal rules? Is there some kind of hidden genetic code that shapes how every city on the planet grows and functions? A really important tool they use here is something called space syntax. Now, the core idea is actually pretty simple, but incredibly powerful. It says that a city's bones, its grid of streets and roads, that physical structure is what fundamentally drives everything else. How we move around, where shops decide to open, and where you see those vibrant, bustling public spaces pop up. The structure literally shapes the function. And this is where it gets really cool, because it creates this amazing self-reinforcing loop. Look, you start with a well-connected street grid that naturally attracts a lot of people just moving through. All that foot traffic makes those streets super attractive for businesses. And then, of course, those new shops and cafes attract even more people, which just supercharges the whole cycle. So these vibrant city centers can literally emerge all on their own, just from good network design, no specific zoning required. And this whole approach is backed by some seriously mind-blowing theories. Take urban scaling laws, for example. They show that when a city doubles in size, its economic output and innovation actually more than double, and in a predictable way. Or fractal city theory, which finds the same repeating geometric patterns at every scale, from a single neighborhood all the way up to the entire metropolitan region. All these different ideas point to the same incredible conclusion. There are deep, universal principles at work under the surface of every city. So the takeaway from this first approach is really profound. The role of the planner completely shifts. Instead of trying to dictate every single detail, their job becomes about creating a great spatial framework, a well-connected street grid, a good mix of public spaces, and then stepping back and letting the city organize itself and adapt organically within that structure. Okay, so that's one side of the coin. The city's hardware, its physical code. But what about its software? What about the people? Well, that brings us to our second approach. This one is all about the social side, recognizing that at the end of the day, cities are built by and for their citizens. It's about the human conversation. Let's be honest, for a long time, public participation was kind of a joke, right? It usually meant you'd get invited to a meeting to comment on a plan that was already 90% finished. It was basically a checkbox exercise. But the new model, which is being supercharged by technology, is called co-production. And here, citizens are treated as active partners from day one, helping to define the problems and even generate the data themselves. A massive part of this is something called citizen science. Just think about it. Every resident with a smartphone is a potential sensor. People can collect super local data on everything from traffic jams and air quality to which parks feel safe.
This gives planners this incredibly rich, on-the-ground picture that they could never get before. And it really empowers communities to make the case for the changes they want to see. And look, this isn't just some pie-in-the-sky theory. It's really happening. Take Barcelona, for instance. They have this digital platform called Decidim, where thousands of regular citizens can propose, debate, and even vote on how to spend millions of euros of the city's budget. And it's led to real-world projects, like turning old, forgotten courtyards into beautiful new public parks. It is large-scale digital democracy in action, and it's turning planning into a genuine citywide conversation.
So now we have these two really powerful ideas on the table. On one hand, the city as a scientific object with a hidden code. On the other, the city as a democratic conversation. At first glance, you might think these are in conflict. One's top-down and the other's bottom-up. But the real breakthrough, the real magic, is realizing that they are two essential halves of the same whole.
This breaks it down perfectly. The first approach gives us what you could call spatial intelligence. It's the science, and it aims for a city that is functional, efficient, and resilient. The other approach gives us democratic governance. This is the social contract, and it aims for a city that is inclusive, fair, and legitimate in the eyes of its people. To have a city that truly works for everyone, you absolutely need both.
And urban informatics is the framework that finally lets us bring them together. It's the bridge. Just look at the urban sensing row. The science approach uses big data to measure things like traffic flow. The participation approach uses data generated by citizens to understand what people actually need and want. Urban informatics gives us the tools to weave both of those data streams together, creating a single, much richer picture of the city.
There's a quote that just absolutely nails this entire idea. It basically says that if you have all the science and data, but no democratic input, you risk building perfectly efficient cities that are soulless and that nobody actually wants to live in. But on the other hand, if you only have participation without any of that analytical rigor, you could end up with popular decisions that just don't work in the real world and fail in the long run. Okay, so let's bring this all back home. We've talked about some big ideas here, but what does this actually mean for you and for the future of the city you live in? Well, it means the very nature of how we plan our cities is going through a massive, fundamental change. If you remember one thing from this whole explainer, let it be this. We are shifting away from planning as the creation of a fixed product, like a static master plan, and moving toward planning as the facilitation of a continuous adaptive process. It's about guiding our city's evolution using a smart combination of sound spatial rules and the collective intelligence of all of us. And that really leaves us with this powerful, provocative thought from Michael Batty, who's a true pioneer in this field. The science is here, the tools are here. The big question now is whether our institutions, our city halls, and our planners are ready and willing to embrace it all, to build better, more resilient, and, crucially, more democratic cities. Ultimately, this new era of planning isn't just for the experts in ivory towers. Not anymore. It's opening up incredible new ways for every single one of us to get involved, to contribute our own data, and to have a real voice in the process. And so it leaves us all with a pretty powerful question to think about. What role will you play in shaping the future of your city?